Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review we are looking at the Tamashii Nations movie realization Ronin Boba Fett. Obviously this is the Star Wars character, and this time he looks a little bit like a samurai. He's got some armor on, he's got some different aesthetic values, and he's got a sword and some other cool stuff, but it's still very much reminiscent of the traditional Boba Fett. And I've heard a lot of people say that this is a really cool figure, and now I'm reviewing it for you because someone sent it to me so that I could review it. So it's kind of exciting, and it's a really cool looking figure. As you can tell, it's very, very detailed. There's lots of stuff going on, but it's very nicely balanced, I think. Oftentimes when you get these type of variant figures, they tend to just pack a lot of stuff on there. This one is just the right amount, I think, so I'm pretty happy about that. And he's got some decent accessories. So let's get him off the stand and take a look at him up close. Okay, so this guy stands, he's a little bit bigger than your average import figure. He's about right around 18 and a half centimeters, which makes him just around 6¾ inches. Right about that size, so he's definitely got some more size to him than your standard figure. Very hefty. I know a lot of people are concerned with the heft of their figures. While technically it doesn't really indicate quality, in this case I think it does. He's not made of cheap materials, so that's a good thing. And as you can see, we have a lot of paint detail going on this guy. You can see on the chest, we have the logo there, and we have the little bullet hole there, and on the side we have the Mandalorian logo. And you can see throughout all of the armor, you can see on all these little detail spots, there's paint application, whether it's just a wash or shading. It's all very nicely detailed. You can see on his helmet there, lots and lots of detail. Pretty much everything you look at is going to have paint on it, so that's always it's always appreciated as far as I'm concerned. We have lots of shading going on in the pants. Just everything is really nicely done. Cat hair. Very happy with it. I like the way the jetpack has kind of like some shading on there, kind of like the metal has changed color from heat. That's what it looks like to me. I hope that's what they're going for, but it does look cool either way. So very nicely done. And as you can see, the sculpt also very, very nice. We don't have any really soft spots on it. The sculpt is very crisp and clean looking, so I do appreciate that. Oftentimes when you get a lot of detail like this, it ends up looking a little bit muddy, but this one does not. It is very crisp and clean, so very happy about that. You can see even on the cape here, we have some nice sculpt work. So very cool figure. So let's look at the accessories. Now obviously he doesn't come with all of this stuff on him in the package. So the sword and the scabbard is a separate accessory. Now here's the problem with the sword and scabbard. It goes on in that little spot right there, but this piece is not particularly flexible. It's actually almost completely rigid, so that's a serious problem because it's connected to this floating belt piece, but it doesn't really move that much. So when you move the legs, and this is all connected to the legs, you really can't move this leg at all due to this piece. And that also, obviously, as you can see here, it's going to get in the way of the scabbard. So that's a bit of a problem. I'm not sure why they did that. It's a little disappointing. It's not a huge deal, but it's something to note. And then as far as the sword and the scabbard go, it's very nicely done. We have a really nice paint application and sculpt application on the wrap there for the handle. And then the blade, while it's not as sharp, no pun intended, as I would like, it's kind of a soft sculpt, but it's not bad. You can still see the difference between the edge and the rest of the blade. And then of course it does fit into the scabbard, so that's a good thing. Not bad. It could be better, but it's not too bad. Then obviously the jetpack, I guess you could count this as an accessory. You do have to put it on the figure yourself, so it might be considered an accessory, but that just pegs onto the back. So here, it is a little bit disappointing in that it's not anchored in any way. So once you peg it in, it can rotate around. It's just that one single circular peg, but that's not a big deal. It's just something to be aware of. You probably saw me fiddling with it as I was going over the other details, but it still looks really nice. And just in general, I don't know if I mentioned this specifically, but it's a very appealing figure. It's very aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so let's continue with the accessories. As far as the hands go, we have a whole bunch. In the package, you have the 2 fist hands, which I'd like to point out, they have very nicely detailed armor on them, or at least padding of some sort. So we have the 2 fist hands. Then there's a whole bunch of other ones. I'm going to try to grab the right ones every time here, but no promises. We have the 2 trigger finger hands. Nothing much there to talk about. We have these two hands, which are gripping hands meant to hold the scabbard. And then we have two gripping hands, which are meant to hold the sword itself. And then we have these two gripping hands, which are meant to hold the other accessories, which I'll get to in just a second. But first, let's look at the gun. So his blaster is very reminiscent of his classic-looking blaster. Very nicely detailed. We have this kind of wash effect going on throughout all of the wooden parts. The metal parts are very nicely done with this kind of pewter color steel, and then a wash on there as well. And again, the gun has some bluing on there, kind of like the jetpack. The scope is nicely detailed, and we have a little bit of a moving part here to make it look kind of like, I guess, a flintlock. I'm not sure about that. I guess so. So we have the flintlock there. We have a jetpack, but we're still using a flintlock blaster. But that's okay. So very nicely detailed. And then the last accessories are all of these things on his boots. Each one of these is its own accessory and is removable. You have to put them on in the first place. Now here's the thing about these. They don't fit on there very well, and they're very small plastic, so you have to use some extreme caution when wedging those into their specific spots. And as you can see, mine aren't wedged in perfectly, and that's because, again, this was sent to me to review. I have to send it back, so I couldn't risk breaking anything. I got them in there as best I could, but he can hold those in his particular hands that are meant for that. So let's go through the articulation really quickly, and then we will call it a wrap. Now, unfortunately, the articulation is really where this guy kind of falls flat. He's very nice looking, but it's going to be hard to get him into too many dynamic poses. Kind of what I said about the leg here, how you can't really move it. That's kind of indicative of the rest of the figure. Now again, I didn't take anything apart here just because I couldn't risk damaging anything, but I'll try to go over it as thoroughly as possible. First, we have the little scouter thing that comes down. However, it sticks out so far from his head that it's not particularly appealing, so that's going to have to stay up there, I think. If they made it shorter, that would have looked a little bit better, or maybe extendable something. I don't know. Okay, so the head is on. It feels like a double ball peg because there's no limitation as far as leaning side to side, so I don't think it's a ball hinge. Then the neck itself is also articulated, so you can move the head all around. Really no issues there. This is a separate piece, this bottom part of the back part of his helmet. It is separate, so it will give a little bit, and then the collar is a softer plastic, so you really won't have any trouble posing the head. Obviously, he can't look up too far, but he can look up some, and then looking down again. Basically the same, but it's still a really cool looking helmet. So I will concede a little bit of articulation for the cool helmet. Now for the arms, we have this giant ball peg. Hopefully you can see in there. It's just a really big peg that goes into the torso that lets the entire arm move around. Then of course we have our ball hinge at the end of that. Basically like your standard figure arts figure, just a little bit bigger. The shoulder pad is on like a double hinge type of thing to let it move some, but it still doesn't move very much. So it's going to move a little bit, but the hinge is really limited, so it's not going to allow for the arm to move very far. You can get it up there, but don't expect to get him into, again, any crazy poses. You do have your bicep swivel built into the shoulder joint there. We have our double jointed elbow, just like you would expect from any figure arts figure, and we have a ball hinge on the... Oh, it's not a ball hinge, I'm sorry. It's a hinge with a ball at the end of the peg. It's effectively a ball hinge. It just looks a little bit different. One other thing I forgot to mention is he does have another knife spear thing that pegs in over here. So that's another accessory, but it's basically the same situation as the lower legs. Okay, so now for the torso, we have what I think is just a ball peg for the main body, just a ball peg. So it doesn't have very much range of motion. It's mostly going to be just a swivel. You can lean it back and forward some, but just enough for a little bit of style, not too much, again, in any particular direction. The floating belt is a floating piece, and it's connected to this piece here, so it hides the articulation really well, but it doesn't even have that much range of motion for being a floating piece, and it's fairly stiff, not super stiff like right here, but back here, because it's one big piece, it does become a little bit cumbersome, so be aware of that. These pieces, which look like they should be floating, are not floating. They are connected to the leg. Whether they're just stuck or if they're meant to be that way, I don't know. It feels like they should be floating, but They haven't come free for me, and since it's not mine, I can't really risk trying. But we do have ball hinge or ball peg hips with the socket, just like your standard SH Figure Arts figure, except there's no drop down hinge. So your leg is basically just moving around a single fixed ball peg. You do get a thigh swivel outside of that hinge or outside of that socket, but it's very limited on this side, and this side it's okay. For the knees, we have a double jointed knee. See, there goes those things again. They pop off so easily. We do have a double jointed knee, but it is particularly strange looking. It's effective, but it looks really weird, so I don't know about that. I think they could have come up with a little bit of a better idea. And that's all chewed up on the inside there, so I don't know. It's not my favorite knee design ever. And then lastly, for the ankles, we have a ball hinge, just like you would expect. You have decent range going forward and back, and then of course you can rotate it around for your ankle rocker. You just have to keep wiggling it until it rotates around sideways. So it's not bad. It's got decent articulation. It's just somewhat limited and somewhat cumbersome, but for the most part, it's pretty good, and it's a very aesthetically pleasing figure. So if you're not worried about super dynamic poses, then this is one that I definitely recommend. It's a very cool looking figure. If I was more into Star Wars and had unlimited money, I would probably pick one up. But since I don't have unlimited money, and Star Wars is just a cool thing for me, it's not super great, I'm going to have to pass on it, but it's still really, really cool. And I think if you guys think it looks cool and you're willing to spend the money, then I think you should definitely do that. You won't be disappointed. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see my upcoming figure reviews, custom figures, and other good stuff. And in the meantime, keep collecting.